My name is Lauren Whitmore. I'm 35 years old. And until last Thursday afternoon, I genuinely believed I was in a stable, adult relationship. The kind built on shared plans, shared money, shared responsibility. The kind that doesn't collapse because of one text message. I was wrong. Ethan and I had been together for 4 years, long enough that our life had stopped feeling temporary. We didn't talk about someday anymore. We talked about timelines, numbers, square footage. We moved in together after year 2, split everything evenly. Rent, utilities, groceries. We had a joint savings account we both contributed to every month. $500 each. No excuses. It was for a house. Not a fantasy house. A real one. Something modest. Something ours. We talked about it over Sunday morning coffee, while scrolling listings we couldn't quite afford yet. Late nights, half asleep, arguing about whether we wanted a yard or a garage more. We'd saved $24,000. $12,000 from me. $12,000 from him. Balanced, equal, fair. Or so I thought. Thursday afternoon, I was at my desk finishing quarterly reports when my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. I'm using our savings to bail my ex-girlfriend out of jail, just so you know. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time, slowly, like maybe rearranging the words would make them less real. They didn't. My screen blurred. The spreadsheet in front of me became meaningless lines and colors. My heart didn't race. It dropped. Heavy and cold, like my body already understood something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. His ex, Maya, the woman he'd dated for 6 years before me. The woman he insisted was ancient history. The woman whose name still surfaced after 2 glasses of wine and nostalgia. The woman whose photos he'd never quite erased from his past. I set my phone down. Stared straight ahead for almost a full minute. Then I picked it up and typed back, "Okay, do what you need to do." No questions, no anger, no disbelief. Just that. My hands were steady, my chest wasn't. 15 minutes later, another text came in. "Thank you for understanding. It's complicated. She really needs help right now. I'll explain when I get home." I didn't reply. Something inside me had gone quiet. Not numb, exactly. More like observant, detached. The way you feel when you realize a storm is already overhead and running won't change anything. At 5 o'clock, I shut down my computer, grabbed my bag, and drove straight to the bank. I stood at the counter and asked to withdraw $12,000 from our joint savings. The teller asked if I wanted cash or a cashier's check. "Cash," I said. She hesitated, not enough to stop, just enough to notice, then processed it anyway. I walked out with a thick envelope and a strange sense of calm. On the drive home, I bought a one-way plane ticket. Saturday morning. Early. Somewhere far enough that turning back wouldn't feel easy. When Ethan came home that night, he looked exhausted. The kind of tired that isn't physical. The kind that comes from emotional chaos. He explained everything. Maya's DUI. 3rd offense. The bail bondsman. How he had no choice. And as he talked, I watched him carefully. The relief in his shoulders. The way he assumed I'd absorb this without protest. I realized something terrifyingly simple. He hadn't asked because, somewhere along the way, he'd stopped seeing me as an equal partner. I went to bed early. I didn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, I started packing. The weirdest part wasn't that Ethan used our savings. It was how quickly my mind stopped asking why, and started asking what now. Because once you've been with someone long enough, you learn their patterns the way you learn weather. You can feel the pressure shift before the storm breaks. And Thursday night, lying beside him in the dark, listening to his breathing, I finally admitted something I'd been avoiding for months. This wasn't sudden. This was just the first time he'd said it out loud. Ethan fell asleep fast, like a man who believed he'd done the right thing. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my eyes burning from exhaustion, my chest tight in a way that felt more like grief than anger. I kept seeing the text. "Just so you know." Like I was a coworker, like I was a roommate, like I was an obstacle he had to notify. Not a partner he had to consult. I thought about all the little moments I'd excused because I loved him. The way his phone always angled away from me lately, screen down like it was shy. The way he'd started taking calls on the balcony, voice low, shoulders turned. The way Maya's name didn't disappear so much as linger. 8 months ago, he'd gone to her birthday gathering without me. He'd said, "It'll be weird if you come. It's not like that, Lauren." And I'd believed him, because believing him was easier than admitting I didn't matter in that space. Now lying there, I realized something colder. Maybe it wasn't weird because of her. Maybe it was weird because of him. At around 2:45 a.m., I sat up. The room was quiet, washed in dim streetlight filtering through the blinds. Ethan's face looked peaceful. Innocent, even. That nearly made me laugh. I swung my legs off the bed and walked to the closet. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't cry. I moved like someone preparing for a trip. Methodical, controlled, almost professional. 2 suitcases, 1 backpack. Clothes, toiletries, chargers, my laptop, important documents, a folder I kept in a drawer for emergencies, my passport, birth certificate copies, medical records, the watch my grandfather left me, a few books I couldn't imagine leaving behind. Every item I picked up felt like a sentence I didn't need to say out loud. This is mine, this is mine, this is mine. When I walked past the bed, Ethan shifted slightly, mumbled something in his sleep, then went still again. Didn't wake. Didn't notice. It felt symbolic in a way that made my stomach turn. By 4:30 a.m., everything I needed was packed. I sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the black screen of my TV, watching my reflection faintly. I looked calm, but my heart was pounding like it wanted to break through my ribs and escape first. I thought about confronting him right then, shaking him awake, demanding answers, forcing him to watch the relationship implode in real time. But I already knew what he'd do. He'd make it about tone. He'd tell me I was reacting. He'd ask why I couldn't be more understanding. He'd accuse me of being cold, jealous, controlling. He'd twist it until I was apologizing for having a boundary. And the truth? I didn't have the energy to fight a man who was convinced betrayal was kindness, as long as it benefited him. So instead I chose silence, because silence doesn't give someone material to manipulate. Friday morning, my alarm went off at 5 a.m. Ethan didn't stir. I showered quickly, got dressed in jeans, a soft sweater, sneakers, practical, neutral, like I was heading out for coffee, not leaving a 4-year relationship behind. I'd already loaded most of my things into my car during the night, making 2 quiet trips down to the parking garage. The wheels of my suitcase had sounded like thunder in my ears. Every bump, every turn, a risk. But Ethan didn't wake. Again. He stayed asleep while I dismantled the life we built together. When I came back upstairs for the last time, I stood in the kitchen and looked around. The mugs on the counter, the dish towel we always fought about, his habit of leaving it damp, my habit of rehanging it properly. The magnetic calendar on the fridge with half-erased reminders. Venue call. Tuesday. Save the dates. Finalize fonts. House fund. Transfer today. My throat tightened. We weren't engaged, not officially, but we'd been talking about rings and venues and a future so naturally, I'd started treating it like a promise. And now I realized something else, sharp as a blade. Promises don't matter if only one person is honoring them. I took my key off the ring and set it on the counter. Then I wrote a note. Short, simple. No explanations. No fight. Just truth. Took my half of the savings. Good luck with everything. I paused with the pen in my hand, hovering, thinking maybe I should add more. Something devastating, something poetic, something that made him feel it. But then I remembered how he'd texted me, just so you know. And I realized a man who can do that won't understand poetry. So I folded the note once and placed it beside the key. Then I walked out. I drove to a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, one of those places with worn red booths and waitresses who call you hon like it's a reflex. I ordered coffee. Black. The first sip tasted bitter and grounding, like reality. I sat there for hours, watching the window fog slightly from the warmth inside, my hands wrapped around the mug even though it wasn't cold. At 9 a.m., when the banks opened, I drove across town to a different one, not the branch tied to our joint accounts. A separate bank entirely. I opened a new checking account, deposited the $12,000. The banker congratulated me like I'd done something celebratory. Big deposit, he said, smiling. I forced a polite nod. My throat felt tight, like I was swallowing glass. Because to him, it was money. To me, it was my portion of a future I'd just buried. At 10:17 a.m., my phone started ringing. Ethan. I stared at the screen until it stopped. Then it rang again, and again, and again. A pattern. A panic. A man finally noticing the house is on fire, after he lit the match. I didn't answer. Not yet. The texts started spilling in, one after another. Lauren, where are you? Did you take the money? Call me now. This isn't funny. Please respond. I'm freaking out. I turned my phone to silent and placed it face down on the table. The irony hit me so hard I almost smiled. Face down. Like his. I ordered pancakes I barely touched. I could feel the moment tightening, like a rope being pulled taut. Soon I'd have to speak. Soon he'd force a confrontation. But for those few minutes, in that diner booth with coffee cooling in front of me, I let myself feel the quiet power of what I'd done. I'd protected myself. I'd drawn a line, and I hadn't asked permission. Because that was the lesson Ethan had accidentally taught me. If someone is willing to make a life-altering decision without consulting you, you're allowed to do the same. At 11:30 a.m., my phone rang again. This time it wasn't his number. It was the hospital landline, and I knew exactly what that meant. He'd moved from panic to escalation. He was at work, and he'd decided my silence wasn't acceptable. I stared at the phone. Then I answered. "Hello?" His voice came through tight, shaking, sharp around the edges. "What the hell, Lauren?" I leaned back in the booth, calm in a way that surprised even me. "Yes," I said softly. "I figured this was coming." And on the other end of the line, I heard him inhale, like he'd been waiting all morning for the moment he could finally make this my fault. "What do you mean you figured this was coming?" Ethan snapped, his voice cracking between anger and something close to fear. Hospital noise hummed behind him, machines beeping, distant voices, the sterile soundtrack of a place where control matters. I stirred the sugar into my coffee slowly, watched it dissolve. "I mean," I said evenly, "that when someone drains a joint account without a conversation, they shouldn't be surprised when the other person responds." There was a sharp exhale on the line. "You took all the money?" "I took my half," I corrected. 12,000, exactly what I put in. A pause, then disbelief. "Lauren, I needed that money." "For what?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "For..." He stopped himself, then barreled on. "For Maya. The bondsman only took 1,500 up front. I was going to use the rest to help her get back on her feet." I closed my eyes. There it was, the part he hadn't texted. "You were going to use our house fund," I said slowly, "to bankroll your ex-girlfriend's life." "That's not what this is," he shot back. "She needs a car. Her lawyer wants a retainer. She's behind on rent. She's trying to get sober." I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it, short and sharp, startling even me. "You planned all this," I said, "without me." "I didn't think you'd understand," he said, like it was an explanation. "You can be rigid." Rigid. Because I expected a conversation before thousands of dollars disappeared. "You didn't ask," I said. "You informed me, after the fact." "She's at rock bottom," he insisted. "She has nobody. Her parents cut her off. Her friends are done with her. I'm literally the only person she has left." "And that," I said quietly, "is not my responsibility." Silence stretched. I could hear his breathing, faster now. "So that's it?" he asked. "You just walk out over one mistake?" "This wasn't one mistake," I said. "This was a decision, and it wasn't about the money. It was about what you thought you were entitled to do." He scoffed. "You're overreacting." "Maybe," I agreed calmly, "but I'm still leaving." "Leaving?" His voice jumped. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done." The words settled between us, heavy and final. "You can't just leave," he said. "What about your job? The apartment? What about us?" "I'll figure out the job," I said. "The apartment's in both our names. You can take it over or break the lease. And there is no us." "You're doing this because I helped Maya," he said, incredulous. "I'm doing this because you showed me where I rank," I replied, "and it's below your ex-girlfriend's 3rd DUI. "That's not fair." "Watch me," I said, and hung up. He called back immediately. I declined it. 8 more calls followed in the next hour. Then texts, apologies, accusations, bargaining. I turned my phone off and paid my bill. I spent the afternoon at my friend Lena's place, an hour outside the city. She worked remotely, lived in a small house with a big yard, and asked no questions when I texted at midnight asking if I could crash for a night. "You look like you're running from something," she said, handing me a glass of water. "More like toward something," I said. "Or away. I'm not sure yet." She didn't pry. We ordered takeout, watched a show neither of us cared about. Normal things, easy things, reminders that life didn't have to be a negotiation. Around 6, I turned my phone back on. 43 missed calls, 28 texts, 3 voicemails. I listened to one, Ethan crying. "Lauren, please come home. I'm sorry. I didn't realize this would upset you so much. Maya isn't a threat to us. She's just someone I used to care about who needs help right now. Please call me back. I love you. We can fix this." I deleted it without listening to the others. Saturday morning came too fast. Lena drove me to the airport before dawn. The terminal glowed against the dark like a promise. "You sure?" she asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm going anyway." She squeezed my hand. "Good." I checked my bags, went through security, and sat at the gate with terrible airport coffee that tasted like relief. I was halfway through the cup when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered before I could stop myself. Lauren, a woman's voice, uncertain, hoarse. Yes. This is Maya. My grip tightened. I just wanted to say thank you, she said quickly, for not giving Ethan a hard time. I know it's weird, an ex and all, but I really appreciate it. I almost laughed again. You have no idea what you're thanking me for, I said. What do you mean? He used our joint savings, I said. Without asking, I took my half and left. Silence. Long, heavy. She didn't tell me that, Maya finally said, her voice small. Of course she hadn't. She told you it was his money, I said. Didn't she? Yes, Maya whispered. I closed my eyes. Good luck, I said, and hung up. I blocked the number. 20 minutes later, my flight boarded. I took a window seat and watched the sun rise as the plane lifted off. For the first time in days, my chest loosened. I didn't know what came next. But I knew what I'd left behind. The city looked different from the air. Smaller, quieter, less permanent. As the plane descended, I pressed my forehead lightly against the window and let myself breathe. Not the shallow, braced kind I'd been doing for days, but a real one. The kind that fills your lungs and reminds you you're still here. I landed just after 9. By 10, I was in a rideshare headed toward an apartment I hadn't seen in almost 7 years. My old college roommate, Noah's place. He and his wife had offered their spare room without hesitation. No probing questions, no pressure. Just space, and that was exactly what I needed. I slept for most of the afternoon. Not the kind of sleep that feels restful, more like my body powering down after running on adrenaline for too long. When I woke up, the sun was already dipping low, the sky streaked with orange and pink. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I stared at the name until it stopped ringing. Then another call. Then a text. We need to talk. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I finally understood something I'd missed for 4 years. He didn't want a conversation. He wanted control. And control only works if you participate. The first call I answered came 2 days later. His voice was sharp, clipped, anger wrapped tightly around panic. So you're just gone? He said. You leave the state and think that fixes things? I didn't leave to fix us, I replied. I left because we were already broken. You're being dramatic, he snapped. Real relationships require sacrifice. Yes, I said calmly. Mutual sacrifice, not unilateral decisions. He scoffed. You abandoned me when I needed you. No, I corrected. I removed myself from a situation where my boundaries didn't exist. He hung up on me. The second call came 5 days later. This time his voice was softer, measured. He suggested therapy, promised he'd set boundaries, swore Maya was no longer part of the picture. I listened quietly. Then I said, You already chose. I just accepted it. Silence. The third call came a week after that. This one came late at night. He was crying. Maya skipped court, he said, his voice wrecked. She violated bail. The bondsman is coming after me for the full amount. $15,000. I don't have that kind of money, Lauren. They're talking about legal action. Liens. Garnishing my wages. I leaned back on Noah's couch and stared at the ceiling. And you're telling me this because, I asked. Because I thought maybe, his voice cracked. Maybe you could help. I'll pay you back. I swear, I'll do whatever you want. There it was. The final confirmation. You didn't ask me before, I said softly. You don't get to ask me now. She ruined everything, he whispered. No, I said. You did. You tied yourself financially to someone who's proven, repeatedly, that she's unreliable, and you did it without me. He went quiet. I thought you loved me, he said. I did, I replied, but love doesn't mean self-erasure. He hung up. This time I didn't feel anything. A few days later, I got a message from his sister, Rachel. She and I had always gotten along. Practical, sharp, the kind of woman who didn't confuse loyalty with denial. For what it's worth, she wrote, I think Ethan messed up badly. I saw the text he sent you. That's not how partnerships work. I'm sorry you were put in that position. I stared at the screen longer than I expected to, not because I needed validation, but because it was the first time someone from his world acknowledged the truth without twisting it. Life began to settle into a strange new rhythm. I started applying for jobs. Had 2 interviews within a week, one with a tech startup downtown, another with a consulting firm nearby. The interviews went well, better than well. It was almost disorienting, being seen clearly again, without having to negotiate my worth. One afternoon, as I sat on Noah's balcony, watching the mountains fade into dusk, my phone buzzed one last time. A text from Ethan. I hope you're happy. Maya's back in jail. I'm broke. My credit's wrecked. I had to borrow money from our parents to cover rent, and you just left, like 4 years meant nothing. I'll never forgive you for abandoning me when I needed you most. I read it once, then again. Then I locked my phone and set it face down on the table. Not out of habit, out of choice. That night, Noah asked me if I regretted leaving the way I did. Quietly, no confrontation, no final blowout. I shook my head. If I'd stayed, I said, he would have made me the villain. This way, he has to live with the consequences of his own decisions. And for the first time since that Thursday afternoon, I knew, without doubt, I'd done the right thing. The thing about consequences is that they're quiet at first. They don't arrive with sirens or dramatic speeches. They seep in slowly, filling the spaces where denial used to live. By the time people notice, it's already too late. 2 weeks after I arrived, I got the job offer. Project management. A growing tech startup downtown. The pay was better than what I'd been making before, the benefits solid, the team young and sharp, and, most importantly, clear-eyed. When the hiring manager called, he talked like I was already part of the team, walked me through upcoming projects, asked what kind of work excited me, told me where he thought I'd make the biggest impact. When I hung up, I sat there in silence for a long moment, not crying, just stunned. Because for 4 years, I'd been shrinking myself slightly. Not enough to notice day to day, but enough that being fully seen again felt unfamiliar. Ethan called again after that. I let it go to voicemail. This one was different. No anger, no blame. Just defeat. I don't know how everything went so wrong, he said. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought being there for someone meant something. Now I'm drowning, and everyone's acting like this is my fault. I deleted it without responding. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. Intent doesn't cancel impact. A week later, I signed a lease. 1 bedroom, hardwood floors, exposed brick, big windows that let light pour in like forgiveness. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. No shared accounts, no joint decisions, no explaining myself. The day I moved in, I sat on the floor with a slice of pizza and ate it straight from the box, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and possibility. For the first time in years, my life felt light. The next call from Ethan came late. He was frantic. The bondsman filed paperwork, he said. They're garnishing my wages. I can't keep up. I don't know how I'm supposed to live like this. I closed my eyes. You chose to tie yourself to someone else's chaos, I said. This is what that looks like. She promised she'd change, he said weakly. So did you, I replied, and here we are. He didn't call again after that. I heard things through mutual friends. He'd moved out of the apartment and back in with his parents, picked up extra shifts, stopped going out, sold his car. Maya was still in jail, facing additional charges. Turns out she'd had an outstanding warrant from another county no one knew about. More secrets, more consequences. Funny how those always surface eventually. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights come on, my phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. Just wanted you to know, he's finally admitting he messed up. Not to you, to himself. It's long overdue. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because his growth was no longer my responsibility. Alicia, Noah's wife, introduced me to one of her coworkers a few days later. Her name was Emma. We met for coffee, talked about design, music, travel, nothing heavy, nothing complicated. It felt easy, and for the first time, I understood what had been missing before. Not passion, not drama, safety. I still thought about Ethan sometimes, late at night, in the quiet moments. Wondered if he understood what he'd lost, or if he'd rewritten the story in his head to make himself the hero. But then I'd wake up in my own bed, in my own apartment, with sunlight on the walls and my phone blissfully silent. And I'd remember, I didn't lose a relationship. I escaped a future where I would have always come second. 6 weeks after I left, my life no longer felt like an emergency. It felt intentional. I'd fallen into a rhythm that belonged entirely to me. Morning walks through quiet streets, coffee brewed exactly how I liked it, evenings spent unpacking the last boxes, deciding where things went without negotiating, without compromising. No one asking why, no one pushing back, no one quietly resenting my boundaries. Just me. The job turned out to be even better than I'd hoped. The work was challenging in a way that energized me instead of draining me. My team trusted my judgment. Meetings ended with decisions instead of circular arguments. When I spoke, people listened. It was strange, realizing how much confidence I'd lost in a relationship that claimed to support me. Stranger still, how quickly it came back once I was out. I heard one final update through the same mutual friend grapevine that had delivered all the others. Ethan was still paying off the bail bondsman. 3-year settlement plan. Overtime whenever he could get it. His credit would take years to recover. Maya remained in jail, now facing additional charges for violating bail and an old warrant that surfaced once the system finally looked closely enough. Turns out chaos doesn't disappear when you fund it. It multiplies. The last message Ethan ever sent me came late on a Sunday night. No accusations, no begging, no anger. Just this. I finally understand what you meant. I thought helping meant sacrificing anything, including us. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I stared at it for a long time. Then I archived the conversation. Not blocked, not deleted. Archived. Because forgiveness doesn't always require reconciliation. And closure doesn't always need a reply. A few days later, I ran into Emma again. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks and laughter that didn't feel like a defense mechanism. No heavy confessions. No shared trauma stories on the first date. Just curiosity. Just ease. I didn't know where it would go. And for once, I didn't need to. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on, I thought back to that Thursday afternoon, the text that detonated my life without warning. Just so you know. I realized something then. That message wasn't the betrayal. It was the reveal. The reveal that I'd been carrying more than my share of the weight, that I'd been negotiating my worth instead of standing in it, that I'd been building a future with someone who thought commitment was optional when it became inconvenient. Walking away wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. People like to frame these stories as abandonment. But here's the truth. I didn't abandon him. I refused to abandon myself. And that decision, quiet, early morning, suitcase in hand, cost me nothing I actually wanted to keep.